Rocksteady Games is officially dead, and it's really a tale of two different developers within the same studio, and that being Rocksteady, where we have the Rocksteady of yesteryear, of over a decade ago, that built up the Arkham universe with these Arkham games focused on Batman and his catalog of villains. We have 4 games in this series, all of them being stellar in their own regard. I know people are going to say Arkham Knight wasn't that good, but now that we have the presence of foresight and seeing what is being developed nowadays, we can say all those games were superior than what we are getting from the modern day Rocksteady games, that is filled with these new hires that came during the pandemic era, during this era where we had force equity, diversity, and inclusion placed into the game industry, where they're hiring people that did not necessarily have the talent to develop games, but they had the right political leanings and the right race or skin color, and they got injected into the development space, and now we're getting a product of those choices, of those hires, and we're left with a game that is abysmal, beyond abysmal, and almost a desecration on the Arkham series in and of itself. And I think that is where we're seeing this overall tale of two different studios within one developer, and this is Rocksteady Games officially ending its run as a studio. I know people are going to say it's still there, but is it really there? If you look at some of these numbers related to the Kill the Justice League game that came out, it has less than half of the peak number of players for the Marvel's Avengers game, and that was a failure game, but it had over 30,000 players, at least on the streaming platforms, playing it. And this is a laughable comparison when you look at Kill the Justice League that has a peak of 12,000 players. It's not even reaching Gotham Knights level of player activity, and that is just the amazing thing. Gotham Knights had 24,000 at its peak, and now on average right now it has only 8,000 players. Kill the Justice League. This is just showing the staggering differences of these two versions of Rocksteady games. If you just look at some of the visual comparisons, you get an idea of what was the talent that was there during the Arkham series creation, and you can just see it visually there when you see Kill the Justice League's dull colors and you compare it to the Arkham games. You just have a stark difference in detail and just care and overall developer skill and creativity, where you're just saying this is a game that was created almost 12 years ago and it looks superior to the game that we're seeing. You can see the details in the clothing and the gait and the walk and the overall look of Harley Quinn here. That is a stark difference with the Arkham games and the Kill the Justice League game. It just shows the lack of skills with this new talent that is being brought in. People are going to say, oh, they didn't have enough time, they were rushed, but that was the same situation for the people that were developing the Arkham games at the time. They didn't have enough time for development or anything like that. They still had crunch time for the workers there, probably even at a worse rate, because they didn't have as much attention to the work activities of people at these games. But you just see a comparison to the Kill the Justice League game. It just shows the level of skill of the new hirees are below the levels of the people that have left the studio, and this is not the same studio anymore. All the people that worked on the Arkham series games, they're not there anymore, and we are left with these people that have been brought in during the pandemic under these DEI rules that came in with the ESG scores that are governed by the investment banks that do investments into these video game developing companies, and they're being forced to hire based on race rather than skill. And we're seeing the difference between hiring people on skill rather than their race or identity. I think that is the core difference here, where we're having people that just don't know how to develop games developing games in a shoddy way. And I think that is the main thing, just with the overall graphics, looks, the game mechanics. This is being made by amateurs that don't have the skill or don't even have the mentorship to guide them, and I think that is what's lacking now. There's no mentorship, there's no guidance in the development of this game, and just overall gameplay in comparison to the Arkham series is just staggeringly below it. If you compare just Harley Quinn's hits and attacks, just something that is entirely different. And I think that is the main thing that people are getting away with this game. They're seeing, okay, there's no skill in the development process anymore, and I think that is in part due to the hiring process, and just you're not going to have this deep graphical outlook that the Arkham games have without the skill level being there. And I think you see that comparison and the blandness. We saw this with Gotham Knights 2. That was an utter failure as well from Rocksteady, and I just think it just makes sense that we're seeing it in this light right now, that this is just not the same studio anymore, and it will probably be one of those studios that closes down. So we saw this with a number of studios that changed their overall development team with new investments and just new purchases from outside investors that took control of the company, and this is leading to a whole lot of layoffs in the video game industry. 2023 was one of the worst years in the video game industry, with over 6,000 layoffs, over 20 studios shutting down, one of those being Volition, that shut down after the failure of Saints Row. And I think that's what we're going to see with Rocksteady Games. They're going to be one of those studios because of the failure of the Kill the Justice League game. The amount of money to put in the Kill the Justice League game has to be over $400-500 million, and they're never going to make that back with the sales of the game, with the live service options they have laid out. It's just not a game with compelling characters that you actually want to play as, and it just doesn't have the skill and craftsmanship of the original Arkham games. And that's why I say Rocksteady Games is probably a dead studio walking, that we're just seeing it's still alive, but I think within the next 6 months we're going to hear about a round of layoffs, eliminating a large batch of people working at that company. And it may be well deserved, but it is sad nonetheless, because this is a studio that has developed some of the best Batman games and just best DC games we've ever seen. And I think that is a sad thing about that, where it is failing in such a way where it's comparable to an already failing game like the Marvel's Avengers. Even though it did not destroy Crystal Dynamics, the developer, it has crippled them financially for a long time. And I think Rocksteady Games is already riding off the back of the failure of Gotham Knights, and I think Kill the Justice League game is probably going to be the last nail in the coffin for Rocksteady. But that's just my opinion. I think that is the case. We see this happening with a lot of studios recently, where they get inundated with these political statements and political activists that invade the studios, change the overall shape and look of that studio until it is eventually bankrupted. And I think that is the case with Rocksteady Games, where it is going to be bankrupted by the people it hired that don't have an understanding of what the fans want and what anyone wants from a Batman series or anything related to the Justice League. I think it's a stupid idea to have your first introduction of the Justice League be a game about killing the Justice League. Off that premise alone, it sounds idiotic. That's why you can just make the comparisons between Marvel Avengers, where of course people want to play as the Avengers. No one wants to play as Doctor Doom or in the group that's destroying the Avengers. Even though I like Doctor Doom, I still want to be the Avengers first. I want to be Spider-Man. I want to be a whole assortment of these characters. It's just more favorable characters that I want to play as, and it's just that logic of not wanting to play as the best characters in the universe is just mind-boggling. I think just from that premise alone, you can tell people that made this game have no concept or understanding of the superhero world or universe. Their first idea of superheroes is to destroy them, and that is just not the general fan base of the superhero genre. We want to see our superheroes be superheroes, and I know that's shocking to them, but it seems pretty obvious to me. And if that wasn't the first sign that we're getting a terrible game and that your studio was about to go bankrupt, I don't know what is. But you tell me, you leave your comments, tell me what you think about the situation. Do you think Rocksteady Games is dead? I think this is the final game they'll probably ever release before they go bankrupt and probably close down and sell their IP to someone else. So I think that's the case. You leave your comments, tell me what you think. Like, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.